We have 1 hour and we have 45 different versions of this album to talk about. We have a plot line. We have a movie that came out in 73. We have his childhood. And we still have to connect. How are you, Judd? Thank you for doing this, dude.
Happy to be here, of course.
You want to know how you got here?
How?
So I put out the bad smoke signal that I need a guest for the Who Quadrophenia. It was very, very difficult for us to find somebody. We're always getting like Who fans. I love the Who. They'd be like, maybe I don't really like Tommy or I don't like Quadrophenia. They're very specific about what they dig about them. And I'm pulling it up right now on Twitter. Let me turn that up. I'm pulling it up. Jason. So I put the smoke signal out. Are there any fans of the Who Quadrophenia? And Thomas Mansadikis took your KCRW guest DJ project and he wrote where you said the Who was one of your favorite bands when you were a kid, probably my favorite band, especially the album Quadrophenia. And you said there's a song in it called I Am One, which is sung by Pete Townsend. And then it doesn't say anything else. So I'm curious. We'll get to what you finished that sentence with. You did Jackson Browne for us, man, like, what was that, like 2 years? Almost, God, a whole pandemic. Tell me about you with the Who. Like, where did this start and everything, dude?
That's a good question. When did I first become fully aware of the Who? Because when I was a kid, a lot of my earliest tastes came from what records my parents already owned.
Yeah, me too.
And so for some reason, I think Who by Numbers was around.
Yeah.
And that might have been the beginning of it. But I also remember that The Kids Are All Right came out when I was young. And I was fascinated by that documentary about the Who. And I also had the movie Woodstock at the house on VHS. So as a little kid, I would watch Woodstock, at 10 years old. And that performance of the Who doing Tommy and was it The Sun Was Rising? Were they on really late at night or something?
I don't think I've actually ever sat through the whole Woodstock thing. I've watched individual clips, but speaking of Woodstock, we just had Bob Colomby, the band leader from Blood, Sweat and Tears on, and I'm not, not just dropping a name here. Am I going out to lunch with him on Thursday? Yes. He loves me. He came to the gym.
That new documentary, which is amazing.
Yeah.
He sent to me, so I don't mean to, big dog you with my
he sent it to me too. There. You got the same code. We got the same password probably.
But I've always loved Blood, Sweat and Tears. And this year when Dave Grohl and Greg Kurstin did the Hanukkah sessions that they have been doing in recent years, where they perform songs that were made famous or written by Jewish writers or performers.
They did it at Largo? Where is that?
We did it at Largo, and I sang Spinning Wheel. So for those of you with YouTube, if you want to hear Judd Apatow sing Spinning Wheel with Greg Kurstin and Dave Grohl, it exists.
Oh my God, I gotta see that. I was talking to Burr because we were texting about doing something, and I was like, dude, because he's into drummers. I was like, dude, I'm friends with Bob Colomby from Blood, Sweat and Tears. And then he just sends me a voice note of him being like, "You make me so fucking happy."
Well, when they were preparing to back me up singing that song, Dave Grohl said it was a difficult drum part on Spinning Wheel.
They're jazz guys. Yeah, he's a jazz dude. Oh, yeah. It's like he came to the jam last night. And I'm going through the crowd and I'm like jumping up on stuff and I see him and I told the Comedy Store people to give him like VIP. They tucked this legend in like the corner, I know. And I was like, and then he called me today. I was like, "Were you mad?" He goes, "Nah." He's like, "I'm just glad I got to see you." And then he's awesome. And like Blood, Sweat, I had no idea Blood, Sweat and Tears were arguably one of the biggest bands in the world, enough to headline Woodstock. That's insane.
Yeah. Huge. And the documentary is about them in 1970 touring Eastern Bloc nations. And it's just such a bizarre story, how it happened and what happened. It's really, really fun. I'm not sure where it's going to be released, but
it will be. Yeah. And everybody should watch it because their music is so great. But
The Who. The Who. So when I was a
Who.
kid, I became very obsessed with Quadrophenia. To this day, I have no idea what it's about. I cannot tell you I understand the story. I saw the movie, maybe I didn't even see it. Don't even care. I just love the music and the sound and the sea. And my friend Michael Strauss and the late great Gary Frank in middle school, we had a black and white video camera, and we would videotape ourselves like lip syncing and air guitaring all these Who songs. And that was some of the most fun I've ever had, is us just cranking the music and we're like 12 or 13 and pretending we were the Who. And that album,
you're me, dude.
You're me. Dr. Jimmy. I mean, when you're a kid, the thrill of that music, and then that song. I always get confused if it's called "I'm One" or "I'm the One."
I am one. I am one.
I am one.
I am one. I am one. Yeah.
That song, which we used in a Freaks and Geeks episode I directed, destroyed me as a kid, and as it does now, because it is about being awkward and a nerd and trying to fit in and trying to convince people you're cool when you don't feel you're cool. And
yeah,
every year is the same, and I feel it again. I'm a loser, no chance to win. I mean, I really felt some deep connection as a goofy kid. Not that goofy, but enough that the song was meaningful to me. So when I directed Freaks and Geeks, it was like only like the second or third time I'd ever directed. It was about that Bill, played by Martin Starr, his mom was dating his gym teacher. Yeah. And so there was a sequence where he wakes up in the morning and the gym teacher had slept over. Like no one told him he was going to. And he's just having his breakfast, and suddenly he walks in, clearly having just made love to his mom the night before. And that's the song that's playing.
You surprised it wasn't.
Wait, you know what? I just got it wrong. Love Reign Over Me was playing over that.
Yeah, dude.
That's what it was. Love Reign Over Me was playing over that sequence. The sequence that was I'm One was when Bill comes home from school, and he's a latchkey kid. His mom's not there, and he just looks sad, and he makes himself grilled cheese and cuts himself a piece of cake, and he watches Gary Shandling on the Dinah Shore show. Yeah. And slowly he starts laughing, and then louder and louder. And then suddenly he's delirious laughing at Shandling by himself. And it's weirdly moving and sad, and so typical of so many people like me who just went home every day and just had nothing to do and would just watch the Mike Douglas show or Dinah Shore.
Sure.
And, sure. And after I directed that, Jay Kazan said to me, "That is the most personal thing you've ever done and the best thing you've ever done." And it really was the moment when I realized what my work was, to become the director I would like to be, was to have the courage to reveal myself through the work, like in that scene, which really was how I felt my whole childhood. I did sit around and I would eat grilled cheese sandwiches and Entenmann's chocolate cake, one bite of grilled cheese, one bite of cake, one bite of grilled cheese, one bite of cake, the big glass of milk. Nice. And I did that my entire childhood.
I mean, I do that now. I don't know what you're talking about. I just got into Oreos and almond milk, and my whole life is different. Found this quote from Pete Townsend saying that rock music allows you to face up to your problems and then dance all over them. Do you feel the same way with writing and directing and filmmaking and comedy, or is there one more out of all of those that really focuses it more?
Well, no one ever explained any of it to me in terms of art and expressing yourself and being authentic in your work. But I think as a kid, I just intuited certain people that I felt were opening up. And so people like Pete Townsend were very important to me, because I felt like, I don't quite understand what all this is, but I can feel that someone is bravely sharing their story with me.
Yeah.
And that was very powerful, whether it was Barry Levinson when he did Diner, or Fast Times at Ridgemont High with Cameron Crowe and Amy Heckerling. There were certain pieces of film and television that really moved me. And in my work, I slowly realized, I guess that's what I'm supposed to be doing. because in the beginning I wrote for a lot of comedians and I could write in their voice. And so I would write in living color sketches with Jim Carrey, and I would write jokes for Roseanne. But it took me a while to go, wait, but what do I think? What's my point of view? And I think that Freaks and Geeks episode, which was, by the way, all about them, that was all about divorce. And that's my parents had a unpleasant divorce when I was a kid. And so it was a way for me to express some of the emotions around feeling awkward with, your parents dating people and trying to navigate your world falling apart like that.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt like Pete Townsend did. And recently I was listening to the Tommy demos.
Okay.
And they're incredible because you really feel it. Like he talks about how that was, inspired by a lot of the trauma around sexual abuse in his life, and all sorts of emotional abuse from when he was a kid. And when you listen to him alone singing it, doing the demos, it's really heartbreaking. And you feel what he was trying to get out there.
I actually, and I mean, I'll be completely honest. I kind of heard tracks from this at record, before this, but today, almost 5 minutes before we started recording, I sat there for the last hour and so with my headphones on and just writing notes and just listening to this record from start to finish. And then I started getting to the demos on the Spotify, like I guess it's the, anniversary record. And and I was like, wait, I want more of this. Just completely blown away by this album. And I mean, from you saying that you have no idea what the story is. And I mean, it's like I'm researching it. Like I'm so interested to find out everything about this now. You mentioned something about Pete. I, of course, never met him, but I think we have a mutual friend, my friend Tol Wilkenfeld, who is a very famous bass player.
Yes, yeah.
And me and her were going to NAMM, that music conference in Anaheim, and so I was meeting her at her place for her to drive. And she answers the door and she kind of like shushes me because she's on the phone, just like, come in, but just don't say anything. And then I'm like, well, is everything okay? And then she shows me her phone, and she's talking to Pete Townsend, and they're having this discussion about Vedanta, which is this like pre-Hindu Buddhist sect of religion about not wanting, and they're just having this really deep conversation that lasted maybe another 20 or 30 minutes while I just sat in another room and foodled around on a guitar. And that was in a sense my real introduction, because I never got into the Who besides the hit songs. I know a lot about them. I know, the members. I can name each one of them if I can point them out of a lineup, but I had never listened to one of their records before. And it's kind of, it's really impressive. And just like you, it's like, I want to know more about this record and what's behind it. And I mean, were you asking yourself that as a kid too? Or you were just like, this rocks?
As a kid, I was just like, this rocks.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand so much of it, but I think it just got into my bones, right? Just the rock and roll of it, the feel of it, the energy.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt that it was, about being young and trying to find yourself and trying to be accepted but there was just so much rage in it. I think as a kid, I just had a lot of anger and I wasn't sure how to express it. And I would enjoy people like the Who and the Marx Brothers, like people who were like, this isn't fair. We're all getting fucked. The system is not right. So whether it was, the Who and We Won't Get Fooled Again, or the Marx Brothers and Duck Soup, people who were like, there's something wrong going on. That's why I did the documentary about George Carlin for HBO.
Yeah.
I just was attracted to that. I don't know why. It might have just been how I felt as a young person who was like the youngest person in my grade. So I was probably smaller than everyone and felt less attractive and less powerful, and but wasn't great at sports. So that was kind of a daily humiliation to be bad and to be picked last. And so anything that was about feeling other, I liked. That's why I worked on Freaks and Geeks with Paul Feig, because I just understood that. the guys that I hung out with and listened to the Who with. It's funny because I had old friends, and suddenly I thought they were going to start doing drugs. So I left and got new friends. And then I realized, oh, they're the guys who are really doing drugs.
Oh,
it was a really important part of my childhood. And I used to love to read those Rolling Stone interviews.
Yeah.
What does this say? You have been signed out because your account is signed in from another device. Am I still here? I'm still here.
You're still here. Yeah, yeah, we see you.
Oh, what was the last thing I just said?
The friends with the drugs, and then we laughed.
The new friends had more drugs.
Yes. But the Who were so interesting to me. So I would read all the interviews with Pete Townsend in these like Rolling Stone anthologies of interviews.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I first learned about the creative process, because, when you're young, you just listen to the Doors. You don't like think about how it happened. And then at some point as a young person, I was fascinated by who these people were and why did they write these songs and how did it happen? Why did they think of this? And so I would obsessively read Rolling Stone and read all of these interviews with people like Keith Richards and Bob Dylan and
the biggies,
Mitchell, and I think that was the beginning of me going, oh, you can do this. You can be a creative person. They're just people who went through something and they're expressing how they see the world. And I'm a person. maybe I can find my way to do that.
Sure. I mean, I think we all have that moment because when we're little kids, like, you were the Who, I was like Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses. And I mean, the hair metal guys, much like the rock stars of the 70s, were these gods, up on the stage, the fireworks and the clothes. And, just like you, I would run home from school, put on, way different record. I would put on like White Snake or White Lion or any of the white bands and just sing into my hairbrush in the mirror and dream. And it did seem like so impossible. And it's so crazy that, when you're listening to something like The Who is something that made you say, oh, like, no, I can do this because Pete Townsend, he had a fucked up life just like me. And it's like, maybe that's the predecessor to be able to do all of this stuff, I don't know. It's like, I don't know much of the background of The Who other than they've gone through, and correct me if I'm wrong, everybody, they came out during the British invasion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have, the Hollies and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and they're what are called mods. I don't know what a mod is. I always thought a mod was just like the haircut with basically the Beatles haircut. I thought that was what the mod look is. Do you know?
I don't think that the Beatles were considered mods. There definitely was some aspect of this culture of, riding these motor scooters and dressing a certain way. And there was real fashion involved in it in the early 60s. I mean, the Who came out of post-war England. So they came from families that had just come through the war, and they were, struggling. There were economic problems. I mean, I did a Q&A with Roger Daltrey once about his autobiography, which is a great autobiography. And he was poor, but he wanted to get into rock and roll and he wanted to learn how to play the guitar. So you know what he did? He made a guitar. He literally like in wood shop class, like built a guitar. and they were like in high school together. I believe like he was in high school with Entwistle and Pete Townsend.
I'm going to read some of the background, the formation.
Yeah, where do we have it? Let me pull it up. Let's get a little skadoodle on this band. And then I actually do have the plot of this album too. So finally, after all of these years, Judd, you will know the narrative.
I know Dr. Jimmy and Mr. Jim are involved.
There's a whole cast of characters, and in the movie, Sting is in it.
That's right.
Sting's always in like very odd movies. You know what I mean? Dune.
Yeah. He popped up. What was that? Something in Treacle. Brimstone and Treacle.
Yeah, he's always. It's like we got a David Lynch movie. Is Sting available?
Can I tell you a funny Sting story? When
Please.
Adam Sandler, who was my roommate at the time, got Saturday Night Live, one of the first guests or musical guests was Sting. I so remember him calling me and telling me that someone wrote a sketch, I don't think it was him, where he sang a little bit of Roxanne. And he called me just freaking out that he had just watched Sting from 5 feet away sing Roxanne at the table read of Saturday Night Live. And that's that great moment where you've never seen anything in your life. You've never seen anything cool. You've never been in the room with cool people. You've never been around your heroes. And I just think about Sandler mind melting because he heard Sting sing 4 lines from Roxanne in a sketch at table read.
That's probably where he created the character and the voice, like, because you probably couldn't get anything out.
Or remember he used to do the concert reviewer.
Opera Man?
No, he had this character that he would talk about the concerts he just went to. It was basically Little Nicky, and it would always end in someone at the concert beating the shit out of him. The beating of my life at the Eagles. Hell faces home.
Never been beat up at a concert, but I've never had a good view at a concert. Even if I buy the good seats, there's always going to be a dude that's 6'5" standing right in front of me. Without a doubt, we need to start taking concerts and breaking up the seat sections by height. That's just my 2
There's
cents.
nothing better than when you're at a concert and all of that does work out. Like, oh my God, I'm on an aisle. The guy behind me doesn't want to stand the whole show.
Oh, I love it.
Oh my God, no one's singing in my ear from behind. Just like all of it works.
Even when I have a good view, like, we were very up close for Billy Joel, and me and Burr, we took mushrooms and went to see Billy Joel, and the guys next to me were it was just the widest old couple, and he was just so elbowy, and we're in the 4th row at SoFi, and then we had seats. This is getting so off topic, but I think you'll appreciate this. We had the best seats for the band, and I'm not bragging about seeing the band Korn live, but we have the best seats. And we're literally in this little section, and the guy next to me, right as the band starts playing, takes off his like skull cap, and he's got the longest dreads, and he just starts rocking. And literally one of them hit my lip, and I don't think I've ever wanted to get like an HPV vaccine. I was like, I'm going to die.
I saw Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden, and Tony Bennett came out and sang New York State of Mind with him.
Wow.
Before the pandemic. And then I also saw him another time because I'm from Long Island and I'll go to Billy Joel multiple times. And the lead singer of Def Leppard came out and sang "Pour Some Sugar on Me" with Billy Joel.
I can believe it, dude. I'm not even from Long Island. I've seen Billy Joel 19 times since I moved to New York. Judd, I go, if I'm available, I go once a month. And they just did the Moon Tower Comedy Festival in Austin, and we do 4 nights of the goddamn Comedy Jam. On the last night, we did a Billy Joel night.
Oh, that's nice.
The best. We did scenes with everybody.
I do Zanzibar with you. I would do Zanzibar. Billy Joel's drummer is insanely great.
Oh, he's the best. The whole band is great. Me and Bill, maybe it was the mushrooms too, but we were fascinated by his saxophone player, who's just this like old Italian, and he's wearing the loud shirt. He's got great hair. He's probably 70 and just
smiling so big the whole time. He never stopped smiling.
How could you not? Dude, he's literally playing Madison Square Garden just to pay their bills every month. He doesn't need to do that. He's just like, I want my band to get paid. They're great. And Billy fucking rules. And to everybody out there, if you've never seen Billy Joel, even if you're not a fan of his music, go. You'll know at least 75% of the songs. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, believe me, I'm from a part of Long Island where we all thought Scenes from an Italian Restaurant was about the pizza place near us.
Really?
We were all sure. And then that was my other big band, by the way, was I loved Billy Joel as a kid. I used to listen to, Streetlight Serenader and Los Angelinos. I loved especially the really early Billy Joel. So, seeing him a few times and then putting a lot of his music in Trainwreck. That was one of the one of the big parts of Trainwreck was that Bill Hader's character loved Billy Joel. And so we would put those songs throughout it and talked about him a lot.
I gotta ask this. Do you have, you've obviously probably met Billy. Like, do you have a favorite Billy Joel story?
I briefly met him a couple of times just at shows, and I went backstage before a show, and also backstage was Jimmy Fallon, Howard Stern, and Sting.
Of course.
He's just everywhere.
And so we all took a picture, and it's just a funny, ridiculous photograph. You know, every once in a while you wind up in a place and there's just a photograph. Like one of my favorite photographs I've ever taken was Mick Jagger was at he was at like a Vanity Fair Oscar party, and I was with Paul Rudd. We kept trying to get in people's space, and then the photographer at the party, we kept saying, take a picture and make it look like we know them. So it's people we haven't even said hello to, but we would just stand next to them and kind of smile.
Photobomb.
Like we were having a conversation. And there's an incredible picture of Mick Jagger staring at me like, who the hell are you?
That's like every picture. There's so many pictures where it's like some of the greatest hip hop stars ever, Dave Chappelle, and then in the corner, Neil Brennan. Like in all of these, there's so many. He's just that dude. It's like the Beastie Boys, Run DMC, and Neil Brennan.
Then you look in the other corner and it's Kevin Brennan.
Yeah. Just angry like. All right, what were we talking about before we went into the Billy Joel tangent? We got to talk about the Who, because there is a guy right now that is really mad at us because this is his favorite record. All right, there's a little formation of the band. Who were formed in 1964. Daltrey, Townsend, and Entwistle grew up and went to grammar school together, like you said. Townsend and Entwistle formed a jazz group in their youth, but quickly became into rock. Entwistle's fingers were too big to play guitar, so he moved to bass. Unable to afford a bass, he built one of his own. Daltrey was a year above them in school and ran with a different crowd, discovering gangs and rock and roll, and was expelled from school at 15. In 1959, he starts a band called the Detours, and that eventually morphs into the Who. The band played professional gigs such as corporate and wedding functions. Dude, just like me, dude. They were bar mitzvah DJing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, dude. One day, Daltrey spotted Entwistle by chance in the street carrying a bass and recruited him into the Detours. In 1961, Entwistle suggested Townsend as a guitarist. Daltrey was considered the leader of, and according to Townsend, ran things the way he wanted them. After discovering a band that also had a similar name, Townsend and his housemate Richard Barnes spent a night considering new names, focusing on a theme of joke announcements, including No One and The Group. Townsend preferred The Hair. Barnes liked The Who because it had a pop punch. Daltrey chose The Who the next morning. They find a drummer even after having all this trouble during a gig in 1961. And that's where they first met Keith Richards, who grew up in Wembley.
Moon.
Yeah. Oh, when I say Keith Richards, I'm sorry, Keith Moon. Yeah. Keith Moon had been drumming in the band since 1961, and he was performing with a semi-professional band called the Beachcombers that wanted to play full time. He played a few songs with the group, breaking a drum pedal and tearing a drum skin. The band were impressed with his energy and enthusiasm and offered him the job. And then he performed with the Beachcombers a few more times, but then dates clashed. All right, let's get to the meat and potatoes. So I guess they're the Who now. And this is what I thought was really cool, because I was always like, when did they start breaking all their instruments? Do you know this story, Judd? Like,
I do.
All right, so for everybody out there, in 1964, during a performance, Townsend accidentally broke the head of his guitar on the low ceiling of the stage. It angered the audience. The audience loved it, but he hated it. So he smashed the rest of the instrument on stage, then picked up another guitar, continued the show. And then the following week, this is what I love, everybody showed up for him. They're like, is he going to break it again? And he did, because they started kicking over shit. But they became popular at the London Marquee Club. A rave review of their live act appeared in the Melody Maker that attracted the attention of American producer Shel Talmy, who had produced the Kinks. Townsend had written a song, I Can't Explain, that deliberately sounded like the Kinks to attract Talmy's attention. She saw, was it Talmy, guy, girl? Let's say guy.
Shell.
It's a guy, Shel Silverstein, told me saw the group in rehearsals and was impressed. He signed them to their production company. My Generation was the next single to follow, propelling the band into stardom. So we start with My Generation, which that's like the full-on mod stuff. Then you have The Kids Are All Right. No, that's on that. Then you have a quick one, which is the first record by The Who that we did on this podcast. Which, have you listened to that before?
It's weird.
One of the first mini rock operas.
It is out there, dude.
It's so psychedelic.
And I do this benefit every year called the Backyard Concert, which is for Teen Cancer USA, which is like the Who's charity, Roger Daltrey's main charity. And so I know how it happened that I host this event. They raise a lot of money for the charity. And one year they were auctioning off, you get to sing a song with Roger Daltrey. Wasn't Pete Townsend wasn't there, it was Roger Daltrey and the Who band. And I was the auctioneer, I think with Howie Mandel. And it wasn't going for like as much as I thought it should go for. So I started bidding on it. So I win this auction to sing that night with the Who. And so then, there's other people performing, and backstage you could tell Roger Daltrey did not seem thrilled to have to do this. And he kept saying that he thought it was going to just be a disaster. And I said to him, I go, I don't need to do it. I'll just donate the money. And he's like, no, let's just do it. Let's just do it. What song do you want to do? And he mentioned a couple of songs, and My Generation came up. I'm like, My Generation, I could probably handle My Generation, since I had been singing it alone in my underwear my entire life. Then I have to go off by myself, put on my earbuds and try to really memorize it. I've got like a half an hour to try to memorize it. So it's time. I go out on stage in the middle of his performance, and I know he's not into it. And so we saw he makes some comment about it about to be a disaster. And then the music starts, and I know it so well, it's crazy. And I do the first part really well, and he smiles, and then I do the stuttering very well, and he gets a huge smile on his face and just starts laughing because I'm doing it correctly.
Yeah.
And then we did it together, and it was a killer. Like the dream version of getting to do that. And I was holding the lyrics, and then like one line in, I threw them in the air.
Yeah.
just did it with him. And there's hysterical photos of him spinning his microphone, and then me trying to, but almost killing everybody. Like it's like Jerry Lewis with Roger Daltrey.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Oh man,
It's a great story.
Yeah, it's like I don't really know much. Like I don't know if they take themselves too seriously or they're just like playful. They're one of those bands that for me has just been clouded in mystery. It's like did they have a lot of like disagreements? Have they broken up a bunch and gotten back together? Well,
I think there's as much drama with the Who as any of the other bands that have lasted 60 years.
Sure.
Which is pretty, remarkable that I don't know if they started in 61 or something like that, but they went to high school together. So certainly 60 years or more at this point.
Well,
the one story that he told that I thought was really interesting and funny is early in their working days, the band was just on speed, right? They're just on whatever Benny's or whatever they called them back then, and they've got a big bag of speed. And he says they would do the shows, and the band would play so fast he couldn't even sing the songs, and he thought it was like ruining the band. And Keith Moon is all messed up on drugs. So one day he gets upset after the gig, and he flushes all their speed.
Oh, wow.
Down the toilet, or gets rid of it somehow. And it turns into like a huge fist fight. Right now it's just pandemonium over that. And they're furious at him and basically fire him from the band for not wanting them to be on speed.
Taking their yellow jackets.
and then finally they ask him back into the band, but he said that they were always they were kind of mad at him. Like they didn't let it drop. It wasn't like, oh, you're the good guy trying to sober us up. It's like, you're the guy ruining everything. And he felt, for a little while out of the group because he was the one who was, not doing as much of everything. I think maybe very little.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be responsible and do good shows and was at odds with them, at times. I mean, Keith Moon is famous because he was on stage once, took like elephant tranquilizers, passed out in the middle of the show, and they had to get someone out of the crowd. And this is on YouTube. You can see it, to play drums with them for a few songs to finish the concert.
I hate to say that. I mean, that's horribly unprofessional, but God, is that badass? I just took this elephant tranquilizer. That's so good. There's this, that's the thing, is like, when you think about it, is that Keith is kind of like immortalized as this, I mean, it is a sad tale, of course, but it's just like, the way that we put him in the discussion of some of the greatest drummers of all time. Roger Daltrey, one of the best voices, in rock and roll, and Pete Townsend, is in the top 10 of guitarists. And John, who was very important to the group, is probably the most responsible out of all of them, and definitely, just still a really important member to them. But from my always understanding that these rock operas, because I was going through the list while you were saying that, and it's like, Tommy, which came out in 69, and then you go into Who's Next in 71, and then this record, I mean, weren't those kind of like the babies of Pete? It was his idea to
I mean, he was the songwriter.
Yeah.
He wrote almost everything. And I think, a fascinating, brilliant, tortured, hilarious person. And I think that, as a band, it's funny that they've lasted this long, because they did seem at odds with each other during so many different periods of the band. And what was very moving in some of the last tours is, that it's sad that it's just Roger and Pete now. And they, but now you could tell they appreciate each other in a new way, as a result of having kept this alive for so long. And they would sing a song at the end of the show, like just Pete and Roger, that was about their friendship and being the survivors. It's very moving. I mean, it's amazing there are people out there doing these shows and still making music as they're 80 or approaching 80, and they sound incredible. I mean, the last show that I did where I hosted and they did an acoustic set, I mean, they couldn't sound better. Roger Daltrey's voice is so good. Pete Townsend's playing the guitar better than ever. I mean, who's going to be, I guess we know who the first person's going to be doing this at 90, which is Willie Nelson, because I'm going to his birthday show at the Hollywood Bowl next week, and he's touring at 90. So this might be the new era. Although it will be funny when there's tons of people who are like 80s new wave bands, and they're all 80 years old, right?
Oh, yeah.
You go see Flock of Seagulls and they're 80 years old.
Cuckoo Jaja. I mean, let me see if I can phrase this right. Do you feel like you've seen most of the artists that you grew up with that you'd wanted to see? Like, who have you missed? Like, I always talk about Neil Diamond, and I know for some people, it's such a throwaway, but for me, Neil Diamond is such a huge part of my life. My mom listened to him. My friend's mom listened to him. I know 90% of his songs, and I didn't have money when he was touring. And then when I finally started making money, he gets Parkinson's and he's done, which is why now I go to every concert. I don't care if I barely like the band. If they're a legend, I'm going.
I never saw Neil Diamond, which I regret. That would have been a great one to see. I never saw Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin was coming to town when I was a kid, and that's right when John Bonham died and the tour was canceled.
Yeah.
And everyone in town was getting excited because it was coming. So I finally was doing the festival in San Diego, the comedy music festival there. And I did a set, and then afterwards someone said, "Hey, do you want to go see Robert Plant?" So what's better than that? You do stand up in a tent, and then someone's like, "You want to see Robert Plant?" They put you in a golf cart. They drive you to the front row. There's Craig Robinson sitting there, and they go, "All right, enjoy the show." And then suddenly Robert Plant plays for 2 hours. by the way, does a lot of Zeppelin songs
Great.
reworked, but not like in the Bob Dylan, what song is that way?
Yeah.
Like amazing, interesting arrangements of a few Zeppelin songs. I'm trying to think who else I completely missed. I've never seen Radiohead.
But you can still go see Radiohead. Like that's
Yeah.
they're going to have an album in the next couple years, and they'll go on a big tour. Yeah,
I've never seen the Kinks. Never got to see the Kinks.
we've had Dave. Did we have Dave
Dave
Davies on?
Davies.
We had Dave Davies on the podcast
Wow.
to talk about, and he was. Dude, you talk about the man.
Yeah.
Like I could barely understand anything he was saying because he's so old, but also his British is so British.
Yeah.
It's just, what was that? It must be the internet connection. But no, but it's a great band. Another band that just like the Who that I really wasn't into until I started doing this podcast. If there was anybody you could see that is no longer touring, who would it be?
You know, my grandfather produced the first Janis Joplin album, Big Brother and the Holding Company.
Wow.
It would have been amazing to see Janis Joplin or Hendrix.
Oh my God.
Sure.
Yes.
I would have loved to have seen Stevie Ray Vaughan in concert for sure. And those are the big ones. I remember when I was a kid, my friend Ron Garner and Kevin Weltman were selling beer at Nassau Coliseum during hockey games. And so they had the uniforms. So one day we put on the uniforms and just walked into Nassau Coliseum as if we were working and watched Eric Clapton.
Oh yeah.
Dressed in our beer uniforms.
And somebody's like, hey, can I get some nuts over here? You're like, "Yeah, just we're all out."
And then I saw the Who at Shea Stadium. They were with The Clash and David Johansen.
Oh, what a show.
And I have to say the Clash smoked the Who. It was peak
Wow.
Clash, and the Who were good. It was, you know, the tour from It's Hard. And I remember feeling like it was a little bit of a letdown. And I think people look back on that tour as not the greatest tour. And then finally I got to see him, and I saw them do the Quadrophenia show. I think it was at the Forum. And I may have seen it also on the East Coast. And that was remarkable, seeing the Quadrophenia live, because it's like unsingable. It's just so much singing. You know, it's very aggressive the whole time. And I remember Roger Daltrey said to me, like, you know, their songs have no guitar solos. There's no break for him in most Who songs. Right. And so it's not like he sings for half the song and then Pete does a jam for half the song. Like most of it is just wall to wall singing. And he says it's really hard. And when you see Quadrophenia live, it just seems like the most exhausting thing ever to do. But they really smoked that performance of the whole album. It was really fun to see live.
After listening to this, that was the first thought. I was like, I wonder if they've done these like stadium tours where like some people play certain albums, like U2 did the Joshua Tree. Like, would they do this record? This is like I said, I don't think I've ever listened to Tommy all the way through besides some of the hits. And I know the hits of the Who. This record from start to finish felt like this complete journey. And much like you, I had no idea what it was about. I got little bits and pieces from the vocals or, you know, what he was saying. But I mean, I loved how Love Reign Over Me is just this thing that's going through it, this little worm that you will keep popping up. And then to finally bring it together in the end. And you did say something that I don't know if it's a solo, but I wrote you said maybe there's no guitar solos, but in the middle of the rock, there is this riff that I wish I could, if you could play it. It was right in the middle, JT. But it felt the closest thing to a solo on there.
And there's also a instrumental song in the middle of it.
Yes, where is it? Let me pull it up because I have a list of some of the notes, and then I found this good breakdown of all the record. Do you think, while I look up this stuff, do you think this is the Who's best record?
It's hard to say because I mean, Who's Next is pretty remarkable. I mean, there's Tommy. I love so much of their music. I thought that the last album was great. I mean, the last album they put out was really, really strong. And so it's hard to say. I have to say the Quadrophenia is the one I listen to the most because it's a vibe. The whole album has a vibe. And it's fun to listen to the whole thing and just have it on in the background for.
I can't agree with you more. I want to listen to this more. The second I wrapped this up, I was like, God damn it. I mean, I really wish I would have started listening to this earlier. But I really have just been so busy, and I'm just to finally be able to sit down and really pick this apart. I mean, from top to bottom, just from the way that it opens. Is Tommy like this? That's my other question. Is this kind of what the vibe of Tommy is, or does this feel like it's a little bit more, they went bigger on this? Because the Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong, Tommy was a huge record for them and a huge thing for music too, because nobody had done really a rock opera. You had concept records, but nothing on that scale, right?
Yeah, I think about Tommy is it's odder. It's in some ways it's more unique. It's more like English music hall at times. It has a lot of different styles of songs, which are old fashioned, and there's great rock songs in it, but less of the opera is like hard rock, where Quadrophenia just kind of burns the whole way. And Tommy has a lot of different musical influences to it.
So, composed entirely by Townsend, the 17-song opus told the story of Jimmy, a member of the Mods, a UK subculture, by chronicling his dissatisfaction with life, work, love, home, and family. And it also functioned as an ode to teenage angst and counterculture rebellion, as well as criticism of the British class, economic, and educational systems. And finally, it tells the story of the Who's first fans in the band's earliest days, playing pubs and clubs around London in the 60s. So that's basically the meat and potatoes. I know there's definitely more, and I think we have some written, but this is from Townsend himself. He says, the reason why this album is so important to me is that he thinks it's the Who's last great album. You think the new one, you still think they're still putting out great shit, but according to him.
Well, I don't know how he defines great. I mean, obviously it's incredibly ambitious.
Yes.
More ambitious than a lot of what came after. Although, he was writing another rock opera called Lighthouse, which a lot of people say envisions a future with elements that one might say are not dissimilar from the internet or social media. And it was so imaginative and so forward thinking that they would play it for people and people didn't understand it. And in a lot of ways, he felt like he didn't crack it, that he couldn't crack it as a full thought, a full piece of entertainment. And so at some point, they just took the best songs out of it and made Who's Next. And it's something that he's re-released in later years. And I think they always talk about finding a new way to present the whole thought. And if you go online and read what it's about, it's so science fiction and weird and awesome, but you could tell it was the kind of thing he played for, like Roger Daltrey, and they were like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
You never mentioned the title of the album, where that came from. The term Quadrophenia was coined by Pete Townsend, referring to schizophrenia ×2. The original release of Quadrophenia came with a set of recording notes for reviewers and journalists that explained the basic story and plot. And the recording was supposed to be the next big thing, akin to the leap from mono to stereo. They built a special studio to record Quadrophenia in quadraphonic sound, but they ended up abandoning the quad mix because it was too impractical.
And they only ate quesadillas. I'm trying to make this work. It's such a stupid joke. It was such a dumb joke. I'm so sorry, guys.
You're trying to get some Q references in
everything
here.
was quads.
I love that song, Bellboy. Why do you like the Keith Moon songs that would pop up here and there? That was a great one.
I right from the beginning, this like I said, this really did grab me. And then I found the article about you saying I am one as one of your favorite songs. Why when you did the KCRW and you were playing the Who, why did you choose that one out of anything else off this record?
I think that it's the one that just touches me the most deeply. Like, I didn't know it as a kid. You didn't really understand the idea of, feeling seen or feeling less alone because of music, or or art, but it certainly was always and still is a song, because I've heard him sing it, in concert this year, that it just goes to the core of me, and just, what it's like to be young and awkward and not knowing where you fit in, not knowing if anyone are ever going to find something about you to appreciate. Just that insecurity. He just captures, insecurity so well. It's just a beautiful song, and I just like the musicality of it. It's just a great song, and I was always a fan of Pete Townsend singing in the Who. I loved when he had songs to sing, and I'm a big fan of his solo work. I always wanted him to sing more Who songs. He's great.
Yeah. So we found out about this. Pete Townsend said the song's lyrical inspiration: when I was a nipper. God, I love British slang, dude. They all sound like they grew up in the Willy Wonka chocolate factory. When I was a nipper, I felt that the guitar was all I had. I wasn't tough enough to be in a gang. I wasn't good looking enough to be in with the birds, not clever enough to make it at school, not good enough on my feet to be a good football player. I was a fucking loser. I think everyone feels that way at some point, and somehow being a mod, even though I was too old to be a mod, really, I wrote this song with that in mind. Jimmy, the hero of the story, is thinking he hasn't got much going on for him, but at least he's won. I mean, that's pretty, it sounds like what you had said earlier, about going home and getting picked last. And, would you say that time when you really listening to this record as a kid was when you associated those feelings that Townsend was describing here?
Absolutely, because as a kid, I loved comedy, and that was the thing I was into. And what was interesting is back then in the early 80s, no one else liked comedy. There wasn't a discussion of comedy as a thing. So as a fan of SCTV and Monty Python and Saturday Night Live and
good stuff,
and the comedians on The Tonight Show, there wasn't another person at school to talk about it with. There was no conversation happening. I was all alone in an obsession. So when I tried to interview comedians when I was about 15, and I had a radio show at my high school, and so I would seek out interviews with people like Leno and Seinfeld and Howard Stern and Sandra Bernhard, but before they were big stars. I think part of me just wanted to talk to someone about it. There was no one to talk to about it, and I did want to ask them, how does it work, and tell me the secrets of it, because I'm going to need it. I would never admit I wanted to be a comedian, but that was always the underlying reason why I was talking to people, and they all kind of could tell on some level. But
well, you were leaving your resume. You're like, no, I mean, I'm just the interview, but there you go. If you need a comedy writer.
But as a kid, I always thought, this isn't my time. I know this isn't my time. I hope it's coming. And I have a feeling that this interest in comedy will pay off, because there's not that much competition. Like people are trying to be lawyers or whatever, sportscasters. No one in my school is trying to do this. So maybe I could get the job doing this.
Sure.
Because there wasn't a lot of competition. And then I moved to California when I was 17, and then met 100 people that had the same dream as me. And I found community.
Yeah.
And loved the fact that now there were people to talk about it with. But at the same time, I still thought there's still only a few hundred people in the whole country trying to do this. Now it might be way, way more. But in 1985, there were only a couple of hundred comedians. So I thought, well, I could be one of a couple of hundred comedians.
And which is so funny that you're saying that, because that was like right around the comedy boom, right? Like, is it like I just remember watching comic strip live on Fox, and everything was comedy related for me. And to find out that it was like, it really, I guess people really just didn't want to do it. And you just thought it was the same thing as being a rock star. You thought it was impossible. And people just didn't even try. I think it's not until now where you see how the playing field's been so leveled, because we all have this camera in our hand, and we can write on this thing and have all the software that you're able to do everything. I wanted to talk about the Quadro, because I passed over this, but I remember earlier I had seen it. We were talking about the Quadrophenia and the personalities that make up this guy, Jimmy, and how he broke it off into the four members of the band, because let me see if I can say that perfectly right. It combines the story of a mixed up mod named Jimmy with the examination of a four-way split personality entitled Quadrophenia. So 4 conflicting personas at work within the band. You have a tough guy in the song Helpless Dancer, which is Roger Daltrey, a romantic in Is It Me, which is John Entwistle, a bloody lunatic bellboy, Keith Moon, and a beggar and a hypocrite in Love Reign Over Me in Pete Townsend. He created the character from an amalgamation of 6 early fans of the group. Now, where's the question that I had for you? Which of the 4 personalities that Townsend created for Jimmy on this album do you think you associate the most with?
Do I associate the most with? I don't know. Which is the biggest nerd?
Frank the nerd. Frank the nerdy nerd. You have a lunatic. You have, let's see, where I just lost him again because I have so many notes.
The guy that hypocrite. Yeah,
look him up, Jeremiah, because like the guy that writes our notes for us.
I mean, probably the romantic in a way, because I used to sit and listen to Love Reign Over Me. You know, like when you're a kid and you know you're dreaming of being in a relationship or falling in love with someone, and that song really just like captured just the mythic operatic feelings around love. But as a teenager, that's times 100, right? You'd fall in love with somebody as a kid and you would just think about them every second of the day. It was just like a form of madness, and that song is so over the top. I mean, it ends with like the wildest scream, of any song in rock and roll, for a reason. And that's how you feel when you were a kid. Like you're going to die if it doesn't work out, if she doesn't like you. You want it so badly. And that's probably more what I was like as a kid. Now, that doesn't mean anyone liked me. It just means as I was lonely.
It's so true. It's so funny how age. I mean, when I was a kid and it was like a girl would break up with me, I would be like, I might as well not be here anymore. I'm a horrible, like no one will ever love me. And then the older you get and a girl breaks up with you or ends like after a few dates, I'm just like, all right, that's fine. I mean, I got the dog. What am I going to do? Seriously. I think it's when you really think about those 4 different personalities, those are very clashable characteristics in each one of them. But for them to be that different and still be able to really create this art. Yes, Pete is the main dude that's kind of bringing the material, but they're all contributing in their ways. And to have these conflicting personalities where obviously we talked about the fights, you were around each other that much, but then to be able to make this art, was there someone that you've had that kind of relationship with where you just butted heads about certain things, or maybe you're not the same person, but goddamn, you guys made good shit together?
Made good shit together in conflict.
Like it just made good shit, or at least you're working on something. You're just like you're both seeing it a different way, and then you're like at the end of the night, you're like, all right, let's go get a beer together because we were both kind of right, or
I've so tried to avoid that my whole life, like the really ugly creative relationship, because the work is just so hard, and when there's any force against you and your instincts, it gets so complicated. And I think every time I do a project, I try to make clear who's in charge, because I feel like someone has to be the final say. It can't be that everyone thinks that they fight hard enough, they'll win. It has to be that everyone knows we're going to fight, but that one person gets to choose, because you could fight to the death on some of these things. And it's so ridiculous with comedy because no one knows if it's going to work. You could fight with somebody on the set, like, we have to do it this way, and then show it to an audience 3 months later and no one laughs.
Sure. 100%.
Like everything you're talking about, is a experiment. I mean, the person that, was amazing to work with, but tricky was Shandling. It was Gary Shandling, because it was in his head. So you're trying to write in his style for him, but you're gonna fail most of the time because he's the best who ever did it. So he's looking at a bunch of knuckleheads going, hey, write like me so I can sleep more. And then you hand it to him and it's like, doesn't hit the mark. And then he's just like, what's the matter with you? Now I can't get my nap because I have to fix it. And I would always be like, of course you have to fix it. You're better than us.
Yeah. That documentary was back. Yeah, that documentary was incredible too, Judd. Like, thank you for making that, because you forget this, like, it's been so long since he's been gone. It feels like at this point that, you know, that it'd be able to have brought up and just remember how genius he was is just really incredible.
I've thought a lot about him lately because he was such a voice of support, right? Like if you were writing something, you could call him and go, hey, Gary, I'm thinking about writing this thing about this topic, and I think it's about this. And he would get excited, and he would give you back a ton of positive energy, and he would kick it around with you like, well, what is it really about? And then he would call you out of the blue, like, are you writing it? What page you're on? And I realized recently, like, oh, this is all way harder without him around.
Yeah, totally.
It made a gigantic difference to have the person that you see as the greatest tell you, keep going. I see what you're doing. Go deeper, take risks. It's worth it. Because when he would like what you were trying to do, you wouldn't think about anyone else's reaction but his. You were just trying to please him in a way. Like if Gary thinks this is worth doing, it's worth doing even if no one else on earth ever likes it. And you need that kind of balls to take big swings.
Sure.
And so with him gone, you know, doing it for yourself is way harder, because there's another voice in your head which is saying, it's terrible. Stop working on it right now.
It'll never work. I know we got to get you out of here soon. So we have a couple Patreon questions, JT. You want to go ahead and read them?
Yeah. I mean, you already brought up Freaks and Geeks. This is from Mark Hodgkinson in Canada.
This guy is so cool. He writes, hardcore. He listens to the record, listens to the episode, and then writes his own review of every record. He's been doing it since the beginning. Teacher with a bad foot. Hope your foot's okay, Mark.
Yeah, we love this guy. But you already answered the first question. Can you share the background to the choice of doing the Who episode? He did ask before a nice little compliment about how he's a 7th, 8th grade teacher and has used Freaks and Geeks for his health and literacy studies for many years. It checks so many boxes in the Ontario curriculum, and the kids still love it. Thank you for that gift. But the question is, was it hard to get the rights to the music?
Well, the funny thing back then, and it's not that long ago, but in 1999, in the previous century.
Oh my God.
There wasn't a lot of rock music on television. People weren't licensing music and putting them on Mannix and Barnaby Jones or Lou Grant.
Gilligan Island, yeah.
I mean, really the only show that had a music like classic rock kind of music was the Wonder Years.
Yeah.
So basically everything was up for grabs. You know, the few shows that had some music like Dawson's Creek, they were using new pop music, but there was very little of that on TV also. So we just put in our budget, I think maybe we had $100,000 an episode for music, which was a lot for an hour television show. But we said that's a priority, that we're like a Scorsese directed project, like Goodfellas. We want to use the Allman Brothers when we need it. And so back then it wasn't insanely expensive. And basically everyone cleared the music. We were able to clear Van Halen and the Grateful Dead. I was shocked when the Who cleared. The biggest heartbreaker of the whole series was for the episode that was about punk rock and, you know, James Franco going to a punk rock club. At the end of it, we had used Only Love Can Break Your Heart, Neil Young. And we were waiting to hear if he was going to clear it. He was on tour with Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. And then we heard they watched the show and approved the usage.
Nice.
Then we get canceled.
Oh shit.
Right? Now they approved the usage, but they wanted triple what anyone else got for a song.
Of course.
And the show was canceled. So, you know, DreamWorks, they were like, well, we're not paying $30,000 for this song. And then there was a moment where like I could have and just said, I'll just pay for it. But I didn't know if the show would ever be seen again. I didn't know if it would get on DVD. I wanted it to.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it would even air. And so, in fact, those last 3 episodes, they didn't air with the show. They aired them all in one night over the summer. Like they just picked a night and did 3 hours of Freaks and Geeks to burn them off.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest regret on the show. I replaced it with Dean Martin, You're Nobody Unless Somebody Loves You.
Yeah.
And it's pretty good, but Only Love Can Break Your Heart destroyed you. It was just really beautiful in the show. And I, in fact, have a master of the show. I finished an episode of it with that song because I thought maybe one day I'll get it cleared. And then when we went to DVD, I went back to Neil Young's people and said, will you clear it now? And they said, no.
Of course.
You had your shot.
Out of all the stuff that you've made, what is your favorite, and what do you think is the best usage of music to image that you've done?
The best use of music. I mean, it's my favorite part of all of it.
Sure.
That's cool.
Find a song and put it.
I think, dude, not to cut you off, but I think everybody, when they're in their head, when they're like, they hear a song, like, if I was making a movie, this would open it and then this would close. Everybody does that. That's, they write their scripts through music usage.
My wife Leslie's great at it. She was the one who said we should use Land of Illusion by Joe Walsh as the opening for The 40-Year-Old Virgin.
Yeah, dude.
I mean, the Wilson Phillips song in Bridesmaids.
Oh, yeah, classic.
That Paul Feig used was a great cue that people loved so much.
The drums, I mean, you can't get that out of your head.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really, there are songs that I like they're obscure. Like we use this Robert Plant song called All the King's Horses in Funny People after he finds out that he's sick. And it's just a beautiful song that most people may not know about. There was a song called Great Day by Paul McCartney that opened Funny People. Like I love the really obscure stuff where you go, I love this song. I don't think a lot of people know this song, so I'm going to try to expose it.
Sure. Yeah, that's terrific. Do we have any other Patreon questions, JT?
Yeah, you answered one of the other ones, but Maria Hernandez asked, there's a film version of Quadrophenia directed by Frank Rodham. If you could make any album into a film, what would you choose and why?
Ooh, that's a goodie.
Yeah,
That's a very good one. I could take an album, turn it into a film. Maybe the last Warren Zevon album, The Wind.
Oh, wow.
He wrote while he was sick with lung cancer. And there's some really rocking songs on it. And there's some really sad, emotional songs. Keep Me in Your Heart, I've used in Funny People.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the one that I think of.
Dude, that's great. I think he's going to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. I have a feeling, because this is, I think, his last year of eligibility. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people that I've talked to, because I vote on it. I mean, and I did not pick him because How
dare you?
I know.
You can't say, I think he's going to get in, and then you're like,
but I think he is. Because I couldn't lie to you, because the listeners would know, because I've said my 5 were Iron Maiden, who else? Tribe Called Quest, Soundgarden, Rage Against the Machine, which is the reason I vote on it, because of Tom Morello, and George Michael. I love those are like some of my favorite bands of all time.
Yeah, those are all worthy.
But also, Judd, just so you know, I have a feeling though, like I'm on the low scale. There's guys. I think a lot of people are going to put Warren in, and he deserves it. So 100%. I just didn't think that anybody's going to vote for A Tribe Called Quest. So that's what I did. Please do not hold it against me. Please put me in a movie. Okay. Even if it's background. Let's get you out of here. Thank you for coming on, buddy. I mean it. Like it's really cool to be able to sit down and talk to you about this. And especially when, how it all just worked out. Same thing with Jackson, where it was like, I'm throwing the Hail Mary and you're like, yeah, fuck it. I'll do this shit. It's you rule, dude. So I ask everybody these questions. What is your favorite song on this record?
515, which is just a blazing rock song that at any moment you could just crank up and be so happy.
No, I agree. What is your least favorite? I hate to even phrase it like that. What song do you skip over if you're listening to this? You want to get to something quicker?
Well, I probably don't know the name of it. That's how you know the one that I know.
There's 17 songs,
because I wouldn't know the name of it. That's how unimportant it is to me.
Sure. All right. Can you have sex to this record?
Yes, but it might be troubling sex. It might be if you're having sex to bad boy, gotta take my left button down. Carry the bloody baggage out.
Jesus. What would be your elevator pitch to get someone to listen to this record?
If you have an hour and a half, I think I can blow your mind.
That's perfect. Promote away, buddy. Anything, what do you got going on now or anything you want to promote, which we'll promote at the beginning too?
I have a book called Sicker in the Head, which just came out this week, softcover edition, and it's interviews with comedians, but some rock and rollers are in there as well. And I believe my Roger Daltrey interview is in there, but also I added a bunch of interviews for the softcover with like Steven Spielberg and Tony Kushner and Tom Segura. Letterman's in there, Whoopi Goldberg, Nathan Fielder. So if you like comedy, and there's some music and some other people in there too, it's a great book. It's very like emotional because I did most of the interviews during the pandemic when people were stuck home alone. So I said, I'm just going to try to reach everyone that normally isn't available because I know they're home right now bored.
Yeah.
And was able to talk to people like Letterman and have these really, deep conversations.
Was that an ode to how you kind of got started? You were just like, was it something that you just were like, now I know all of these people, I can get people easier and they're home? Or was it like, let me just go back to my roots of interviewing these like comedy gods and stuff?
I wanted to raise money for this charity called 826, which Dave Edgar started, which is free tutoring and literacy programs for kids in different places around the country. So I thought, well, I'll take all my old interviews from high school. I'll do a couple of new ones and I'll give all the money to them. And so I interviewed Chris Rock and Jon Stewart and people like that for it. And then it just did really well. Then I was like, I should have kept half the money. You don't have to donate all the money. You could donate 10% of the money. Some proceeds go to.
Some proceeds.
And so during the pandemic, I thought, well, this is a great time to do it again. And I feel like it led to people going to more interesting places because of the state they were in.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Judd, thank you once again for coming on, buddy. I can't thank you enough, man.
Of course. A pleasure.
All right. So we're done. Dude, you rule. That was great, man. And
Awesome.
and seriously, like just so much fun talking. I'm actually excited to listen to this record again after hearing what you said. Would you mind just looking into the camera, just doing a little promo, just saying, hey, everybody, I'm Judd Apatow. I just did the 500 with Josh Adam Meyers where we talked about the Who Quadrophenia, and then you can say whatever you want after that.
Hi, this is Judd Apatow, and I just did the 500 with Josh Adam Meyers about the Who's great album, Quadrophenia. I'm looking into the camera to tell you to listen to it. Josh didn't tell me if it was on video or not, so I didn't take a shower.
It's not, we don't only give it to the Patreon, so don't worry. This isn't going out, but that clip will, so that's perfect.
awesome.
Dude, thank you, Judd.